And so as we've just finished our round of check-ins here, we're just going to move toward setting our intention for the call together. Uh, Benny and I have really created this after a few years of friendship that is built around sense making together. And so we really wanted to sort of finally create something real, as a result of this years of friendship that we've had trying to make sense of the world. And it made sense to us to theme it around that topic of sense making. So I guess what I wanted to do was just tee up Benny and also myself to share a bit of where we're coming from with creating this community and what we're hoping to achieve by bringing us together, which is not exactly a small question. But Benny, if you would like to take a crack at it, then I can conveniently follow you.
Yeah, yeah, what's coming to mind is the I read this Buckminster Fuller book, and in the very beginning, the foreword from his granddaughter, I think, said she had memories of being at the dinner table, and he would prompt the everybody at the dinner and be like, what's the most important thing that we could be talking about? And so I think one aspect of what people are calling the meta crisis is that we don't really feel it. We're kind of like disconnected, whether in mind or body, um, from the stakes of our world. So I think there's a deep richness and meaningfulness that comes from bringing these topics up in relationship, and learning that really, has grief and different things, but ultimately creates like a deeper sense of um, ecstatic urgency or inspiration to really like seize the day and be like, I'm a part of maybe one of the most important times ever in the history of humanity slash Earth. And I can play a role. I'm here alive. That means that I can play a role. And I think that, yeah, that's the strongest thread I'm feeling is like not, I just watched Dead Poet Society recently, and there was some sort of like invocation of not arriving at your death only to find that you haven't lived. And so I think there is this coinciding between fully living and also like answering your inner calling, which is like matched to what the world needs. And so I think this discussing this is like a tool to inspire and invoke the deeper threads of meaning in our being that guide us towards playing a role in this really important time. So yeah, I'll cut it there.
Well, I noticed that I set you up to be hard to follow, so well done. I would say a couple of more pieces. One of them is, I think just being with topics like the ones that we're going to talk about, it trains this capacity to hold paradox. And I really think of that as a quality of sort of spiritual maturity. The more we can practice holding, something heavy or something we might call dark at the same time as lightness, optimism, positivity, I think the more we grow. And yeah, one of the, I think I would say key issues that I notice is people always going for one side or other, and not having this capacity to just be with both at the same time, and that could be enough of a way to make sense. I think one of the other things I would name is this just connection to agency. Like there's a clear orientation that we have here to sort of trying to make sense of the big picture, but then sort of as Priscilla was alluding to, bringing that back down to the ground and into our embodied, one person life that we're living is really, really challenging, or it can be for many people. And so um, part of the intention here is to actually reflect and look at the way that we relate to these big picture issues, um, with the hope of reflecting on that toward greater agency. Like, what can we do? How should we live? That age-old philosophical question. How should we live in the light of the insights that we have? Um, Otherwise, I would just add that for me and Benny, there's been a sort of shared resonance over many of these frames from philosophers that we've both resonated with. Um, Daniel Schmachtenberger, Jamie Wheel, Nate Hagens, and John Vervaeke are the ones that come to mind off the top of the list. Um, And so part of what we wanted to create was just a space to share framings that we found gave us meaning and insight into the world, in the hope that they might resonate with more people. Um, and so to make it sort of practical to begin with, I did want to tie this to something real world, because in a few minutes I do want to present some frames from this author Sebastian Dienst that I sort of found the best one take distillation on the world situation that I've really found. But there is a sense when dealing with that more, again, big picture material, the main question is what to do or how to get involved in transitioning from this global system that is becoming obsolete in different ways and transitioning toward something that I see as emerging and still in the process of um, yeah, coming into realness. And and so making things as concrete and real as possible is quite important to me. And to that end, I've been, as you know, in connection with Priscilla, connecting with these people doing retribalize, and they've basically developed kind of like a matchmaking system for community building. And so I really see that the future is built around local communities and local communities, uh, working out how to network with each other and skill share, and there's a whole interlinked network of them, obviously. But we also need, once we get into those tribes or communities, innovative work in sort of collective decision making, so governance, in the broad area of philosophy, spirituality, what is the good life, who are we and why are we here, and also our infrastructure, literally like what things are made out of. Um, and so it's my intention both to keep pointing toward that every step of the way, like here's ways that we can live that are aligned with what we might consider, hope, optimism, and meaning, um, while also not looking away from that which deserves to be grieved for. And so to that end, I've started setting up these real world residency programs. And yeah, the next one is happening in Tuscany in September of this year. And then over successive months, I've started to actually build these physical spaces in the world where people who are aligned with this way of looking at the world can meet and then share space together, practice with intention, not only talking about these topics, but seeing what comes up between us, what we could innovate together culturally, and in terms of bringing all of these ideas into one melting pot and seeing what might co-create out of it. Um, I don't want to go on about that for too long. So yeah, I might just check with Beni if there's anything else that you feel that we ought to include in terms of framing the sense-making community in the call today.
You're mute.
I was saying I feel like you covered enough ground, and there's always more. But the last thing I would include that I meant to say in my share was the Socrates quote about like the unexamined life not being worth living. And I think we're very much like in a process of examination here in this call to live a life worth living.
Yeah, well said. And so, to be honest with you, this as I was preparing for this, I'm realizing that the content that I want to deliver, it's a lot to navigate. So I try to ask for your permission as I move through some of what I'd like to share, um, before we can come to a more reflective space. I'm hoping not to spend too long on this part of the call. If each of you did want to drop your emails in the chat, I would love to send you a resource page that I drew up for this, which has all of the notes and the slide deck that I'm about to share from as well. And just to introduce where this is coming from, so there's an author, sense maker, philosopher, Sebastian Dienst, and I've been connected with him for about a year. And a few weeks ago, I was on a call with him where he shared, a framework for making sense of the world today that I found to be sort of the best one delivery distillation of the whole world situation. And for me, I found that incredibly what would I say? It allowed me to just grok the whole world situation in a way that I hadn't before, which for me was quite new. Like I studied these other thinkers that we talked about briefly, but they all take many, many hours of really digesting what these uh, often brilliant thinkers have to say. And so receiving it all just sort of in one go, what's this picture of the world that we're in? Um, I found that very helpful. And none of this is like um I'm hopefully this is all at least helpfully wrong. This is all questionable and open to debate, of course. Um, I did want to start my little screen share if I can. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And you're
So,
also
yeah,
a little cutout like on your screen share,
Hmm.
which is kind of blocking actually the left part of the slide.
okay. What I might do is change the layout to this one.
This one's still like now it's like
Hmm.
half and half. I don't
How
know if
about
there's one that says
content
just
only?
only. Yeah, yeah, this one. Yeah.
That one's better. Okay. Okay, so again, this is primarily not my work. It comes from Sebastian Dienst, and I've tied in work from a lot of other thinkers to make a few notes about this presentation. But this is primarily his work and open sourced after he presented it. And so the very rough framing is that there's a trend of breakdown and collapse. There are some things that are going through a process of uh, disintegration, broadly speaking. Uh, and then there are some trends which are more about breakthrough or uh, becoming, some things that are emerging that haven't been before. And again, in terms of holding polarity, it's really important to be able to see both of those trends at the same time. And so I'm going to go through 5 different trends that are more breakdown first, and then briefly, without going super in depth into each of them, 9 different forces of breakthrough. And so again, some of these we might already be aware of, but I'm hopefully able to provide a couple of new insights for each one. And again, I'm inviting people to take notes or um, note points of disagreement along the way that we could reflect on together. And so really the main first one is artificial intelligence. Everyone has heard about this a lot. So the main first point I wanted to make is that in case anyone's not aware, AI is not LLMs. There are many kinds of artificial intelligence that are reshaping all industries that are not large language models. Um, yeah. And so for me, I find when I study this topic, I find there to be a fair bit of hype. And I think, as far as I can tell, AGI and ASI may be further away than it might seem, according to some people in the field. Um, but that said, the risks of these technologies shouldn't be downplayed just because they might be further away than we think. So even, quite powerful narrow AI, which already exists, radically magnifies the existing sort of existential risk landscape and creates new kinds of risks. It also does things like accelerate the ecological collapse, which we're going to talk about a little bit. And even just, again, narrow AI, it changes many features of the world much faster than we can keep up with. So it changes the rate of change. With this topic on ASI and AGI, again, he goes into much greater depth, and I'm not going to spend so long on his presentation, but I'm going to share it with you if you'd like to. The positive potential of these technologies is very real, but importantly, if you hold the risky side, that negative side usually wins. So, for example, curing cancer with AI doesn't matter so much if a new kind of biological weapon wipes us all out, for example. So the risk landscape from these new technologies is very real. I'm going to move through this topic just to say that this kind of technology is going to continue to have a huge effect on the world. And that's why I see that returning to these sort of fundamental human skills, skills that are about like connection skills, interpersonal skills, skills for community, is really important because I see that the future is going to be rooted around these cultural, artistic, and spiritual practices, which are the ones that are least able to be outsourced. Um, I won't linger on that any longer. I will share my notes with you though. Okay, so as I move quickly to this one. So basically, the global economic system is all networked together. And this doesn't need to take long to explain. Basically, the fact of interest creates debt, of which there's a lot. There's a lot of debt and increasingly like exponential amounts of debt. And the problem with that is that it embeds these growth obligations into the root of the economy. We see that we need more and more money, to keep up with the debt that we owe. But the thing is that money is supposed to be a measure of real goods and services, which are finite. And what that means is that it's basically impossible to keep running a linear materials economy with extraction and pollution dynamics on a finite planet. And economics that has these exponential growth curves built in doesn't really work on one planet Earth. And what that implies is that our global economic system is fragile at the deepest level, and it's bound to transform over the coming decades. He goes into greater depth here about, the implications of all this debt and how it has this built-in fragility. So it's, again, quite a detailed presentation that he gives. The key thinkers for me here have been Nate Hagens, and then Michelle Bowers as well. Has really helped me to understand how there is a future to economics, right? Economics is also reorganizing around peer-to-peer exchange, ways of drawing wealth down into local community rather than extracting it up into these huge multinational corporations. I might also mention Kate Rayworth here, Donut Economics, working out these economic systems that can be circular rather than having these exponential curves built in. Again, as I move on here, this is the third of 5. This is somewhat of a misnomer. I think a better term would be ecological collapse, because you might have already known about the planetary boundaries framework from the Stockholm Resilience Institute, I think it's called, and Johan Rockström, its lead author. And they talk about basically 9 different planetary boundaries. If you imagine those as like, those boundaries are like flashing lights on the dashboard of the Earth. And so 7 out of 9 of them have already been crossed, not just climate change. It's really important to keep that in view because climate change gets so much media hype, and it is a real risk, mainly because these extreme weather events cause resource shortages, at least in part. With drought and floods and fires, there's less food that's easy to grow, right? And that can cause regional wars and then mass migration. But yeah, that's only part of this ecological collapse that is currently underway. I had just 1 or 2 more brief points about this, that despite this collapse that's going on, it is probably going to take us centuries or millennia to fully recover from this ecological transition that we're going through. And those systems, they're fragile and they're delicate and they're complex and they're evolved over millions of years. And so ecological health is not really something that can be engineered so quickly, although at the same time, there are important regenerative innovations that shouldn't be downplayed either. Basically, what I take that to mean is that the decisions that we make about how we live in relation to the environment, to the ecology, are more important than ever because they can turn our ecological situation from being really, really, really bad to just really bad. And that's a big difference. On the positive side, basically, the more community hubs, the more local places which can grow their own food, to learn about ecology and complexity science, to practice agroecology, to practice permaculture. The more of those we have, the more nodes of resilience there will be. And so connecting those regenerative hubs amidst society sort of reorganizing itself around bioregions, this can slowly start to create a regenerated Earth. I won't spend any longer on this one because I do want to move on. This one won't take me very long. So Dienst draws mostly on Ray Dalio here to talk about this cycle of empires. And so what he's talking about is Pax Americana, this idea that the world that we live in is built around American geopolitical dominance, which Ray Dalio thinks is basically rooted in the power of the US dollar as a reserve currency. The thing is that it costs a lot for a nation to rise to the status of having the global reserve currency, and there's inevitably some kind of decline on the other side. Economics is not exactly my forte, so please look deeper into Ray Dalio here. But as far as I understand it, the US-based world order really followed from the peace between major military powers that we've had since World War II. And that peace was historically incredibly rare to have a period of the major powers in the world not fighting amongst themselves. Well, where did that peace come from? Well, it comes from increased economic growth for everyone, which was basically the solution. Instead of fighting each other, we can all grow and all be happy. But the thing is that when we realize that we can't have this exponential growth on a finite planet, then we basically return to fighting each other. And that geopolitically, it looks like nation states moving toward regional blocks, towards more authoritarianism. This is the democratic downturn, and basically waning US influence on the geopolitical landscape. And I take that to be bad news because Pax Americana has been incredibly, beneficent for all, first world countries, like my own Australia. And yeah, I think geopolitical tension and war is on the horizon there. I'm almost done here with the sort of bad news side of it, with one other major trend of breakdown, which he calls breakdown of trust. I've sort of substituted John Vervaeke's meaning crisis. I think this breakdown of trust in institutions, in the media, and in the bonds between us, that's an aspect of the meaning crisis. So other than this, economic and ecological or geopolitical aspects to the meta crisis, there's also the interior dimensions of it, obviously. And so many people are feeling not only dislocated physically, but dislocated spiritually. We're not really sure in the way that we used to be sure how to connect with ourselves, how to connect with each other, how to connect with the natural world, and how to connect with a sense of something sacred. And that's part of what creates this landscape where trust becomes much harder to find. This crisis of the meaning crisis is particularly affecting the West. It's not clear to me that other parts of the world are experiencing a cultural crisis to the same degree, but it does affect them. Yeah, so he goes right into this stuff about COVID and then Epstein as well, which is, I would say, less interesting to me, although still relevant. Yeah, and so that broader crisis of meaning is a trend where many people experience a loss of meaning in their life. And that basically means that they feel that the world doesn't really make any sense to them, that they don't really have a sense of purpose. Nothing is significant to them, and they're not significant to anything. And they broadly feel lonely, isolated, and disconnected. I know that's broad brush strokes, but I don't want to spend longer on this than I really need to. And so to sort of counter that, I think we can start to understand through Vervaeke's work, among other cultural thinkers, we can understand what the ingredients are that we need for a cultural renaissance of some kind. And again, to me, this includes reorganizing around local community, co-creating a shared worldview with each other, and then practicing an ecology of practices. And that practice, I'm essentially talking about wisdom schools or neo-monasteries, places that are designed to affect this reconnection with self, other, nature, and the sacred. Tristan Harris is also a very helpful voice here about how this meaning crisis is driven by technology. I would just add one final point as I finish these breakdown forces. In different ways, all of those 5 breakdowns are products of multipolar trap or social trap dynamics. What I see is that this underlying dynamic or factor which is driving the meta crisis is in common through all of those breakdown trends, although it manifests very differently. And so the key resource here, Meditations on Moloch, has been really helpful for me to look into essentially why this short-term selfish game theoretic thinking can create fragmentation that we see showing up in the way that these systems are designed. And so for me, the whole point of creating spaces to explore cultural innovation, right, is can we counter this spirit of fragmentation between us? Can we account for these multipolar trap dynamics? And that's to me like a design constraint on building the new Earth. The new systems that I see really have to account for the spirit of fragmentation. And so I won't spend so long on these breakthrough forces. He doesn't either. They come in 3 broad movements. This is the key slide here. Technological innovations, the way that the system is already reorganizing systems, and then more about consciousness evolution. So as I again very briefly go through these, the fact of new artificial intelligence is opening up huge amounts of scientific research, on a very accelerated time frame, which is incredibly that's amazing. As well as robots, right? So in different parts of the world, I mean, this is still kind of out of reach until everyone's got one, I think, but it is definitely true that more cognitive labor and physical labor is being decoupled from our human hands. Yeah, this one is one of the most interesting to me. I wouldn't say most, but one of the fastest moving areas of sort of AI influenced research is in genetics and synthetic biology. And there's a whole existential risk landscape that comes from that, but there's also these amazing solutions to diseases that have been bothering humanity for a very long time. Yeah. Again, not exactly my area of expertise, quantum computing, but I understand it to be a completely different substrate for computing that could create entirely new classes of technology. That's really all that I will say following Dienst on that topic, but it is something to notice and be aware of. And so the second trend here, again with 3 parts, was about the way that the system can be reorganized. So the fact of the global monetary system showing its fragility means that we can deeply reimagine what is money? How does money relate to value? How can we coordinate to value things and exchange and trade? These questions become possible at a very deep level. I would like to say more about that, but I won't. So the second one here is about energy production and distribution. This is basically the renewable energy transition. I won't spend time sort of throwing rocks at it in the sense that we don't necessarily have all the rare earth minerals that we need to do the renewable energy transition, but it's definitely underway. There may be more bumps along the road, but definitely the future of energy production I see as being local, at least partly. I wouldn't want to say completely local. Yeah, and then the final one here in this section is just these new digital tools. It's really important to notice this one, I think, is that the fact of the internet, not just the AI, but the fact of the internet makes possible new forms of decision making and governance that were not previously possible. So structures like the US government, the US Constitution, they were built in a world where people would have to ride from one town to another. And so the fact of these new technologies, they really make possible new kinds of experiments. Liquid democracy comes to mind, just as a quick example. I'm going to whiz through these although in some ways they're the most interesting. This one is simply about, biohacking, longevity science, psychedelic medicine. People are getting much more interested in human potential and in technologies that can support us realizing that potential. This is over 100 years or more. This one, I think, is in some ways the most interesting to me, ecological awakening. So we have this awareness that the earth is in some ways an extension of our own body, that it's a part of us, that it's not just something to care for, it's actually part of who we are. And so the systems that we're transitioning toward are built on regeneration. They're built on this interdependence with the earth itself. And that's a growing sense of our awareness of who we are. It's not just things that are nice to have or that are about particular values or sensibilities. I really see that this new emerging cultures around the world are infused with a deep kind of ecological awareness that is very, existentially tangible, I would say. It's a real sense of living differently in the world. Finally here, this one is in some ways the most interesting. Many more people than in the past report mystical or transcendent experiences. That might be because we're better at reporting it now. Like we're more interested in these people and they feel more inclined to say so. But I don't think that accounts for all of it. So we basically, many people report being spiritual but not religious. And so the fact of many people disembedding themselves from the traditional religions doesn't mean that our sort of religious genes, if you like, go away. We still have access to transcendent experiences that for many people are deeply meaningful and transformative. So that was kind of the end there, those 9 major forces of breakthrough, which we could certainly spend another several hours talking about. But if I try and just put all that together at the end there, it's really a phase shift moment. These things are breaking down and breaking through at the same time in a way that shows us that the system is reorganizing. I forget which field studies phase shift dynamics. I think it might be physics. This is quite an interesting slide here, as I'm almost done. Yeah. Basically, nothing seems to change for a long time, but then it very quickly reorganizes itself. I think we're sort of coming up to the threshold of that in the time that we're alive. Both of these trends are happening at the same time. Again, to re-emphasize that. Yes, it looks a great deal like chaos, and in the light of that chaos, many people are feeling increasingly fearful, uncertain, not sure what's going on, which is the whole reason for sense making, right? If we can keep our eye on the fact that we're in this moment of great initiation, the great turning, some people call it, then we can keep calm. We can be rooted in holding this transitional moment. Yeah, and afterwards, it looks like something fundamentally reorganized, something new that's really impossible to predict beforehand. This is a great analogy, but I won't dwell on it. And I'm almost done here. And so I would finally just add that overall, we're sort of living through a phase shift, which is a moment which is akin to me to the jump from a single-celled organism to a multi-celled organism. It's of that kind of a depth. And even that is just an analogy or a metaphor, right? I think the scale or the depth of what we're living through is really actually quite difficult to grasp. I see it as a moment of initiation where our species basically moves from adolescence into adulthood. And basically what we can do is get involved by building the new system, which is emerging to replace the old one. That still needs obviously a lot of work. And to me, that looks like reorganizing around these local community hubs and then practicing regenerative forms of land care, engaging in this cultural renaissance that I mentioned, which is a lot of my own work, and then innovation in collective decision making, for example, through digital infrastructure. Participation in this transition, it also looks like grieving all that's being lost still, and also still engaging with the old system, which is becoming in many ways obsolete, but engaging in ways that to help it transition and transform. Yeah. And so again, humble plug for Sebastian Dienst here. It's pretty amazing that someone put this together in one go from my point of view. And I would really recommend looking more deeply at these slides and following his work. And so you guys got through that with me pretty well, it felt like. And I immediately want to sort of stop and drop down to the body and we check in and reflect with each person. And I was wondering, Benny, if you would be okay with leading that part.
Yeah. You mean like the meditation part?
Um, I want to go into a little meditation or visualization, but before we do that, I just want to check in with each person and ground us in the body in this moment.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, so let's just turn our attention to our bodies and start to notice like what the sensations are. Do you feel pressure in your belly, or do you feel tightness somewhere? Yeah, just bringing the light of awareness. Just doing a quick body scan, starting your feet and coming up to your knees, just moving through. Try not to have any opinions, but yeah, what are you sitting with? How's your body feeling from taking in that information? You just take some deep breaths and breathe into the parts that maybe feel a bit tighter. And just relax into it. See if you can just relax. So yeah, just taking note of this, integrating intellectual information with sensations in your body. And I can come back and just notice from this body awareness what are natural curiosities or impacts of the material that was just discussed. And I really feel like there's great wisdom in asking the right questions. I feel like almost more than answers. Well, I think definitely more than answers is like once we have some sort of an adequate understanding, what are the right questions which will turn us towards the direction of adequate answers. Um, so yeah, just invite you guys to keep more of a body awareness as you're speaking, and yeah, just being present.
And so part of our intention for the call today is to go into a bit of a meditation or visualization, which Benny's going to lead in a few minutes. But before we do that, I want to turn toward reflecting as a group. And what we just went through together, like me presenting that, was a bit of an ordeal in some ways, and in a lot of ways, quite different from what I'd really like to be doing. Like one person delivering a lot of information is quite, um, I see that as a mode of information delivery that is itself becoming obsolete. So in some ways, I'm a lot more interested in what we can unpack together. And so I just want to check in with each person and get a sense of what it's like to hear all that, what it's like to take in and make space for anyone to share any thoughts or any feelings or any sensations that they'd like to bring to the group. I wanted to throw it to anyone who feels called to jump in first. Where are you sitting at right now?
I can share. As I have been checking with my body. Thank you for that, actually, bringing it back to the sensations. I felt, as you mentioned earlier, a sense of urgency, and which is coupled with excitement, actually. So I don't feel the situation as so daunting because of the awareness. Those things are not new to me, at least. Um, and so I had time to ponder on that and see like, yeah, there are definitely other ways, and it's going to go alongside. The collapse is going to go for me alongside the creation of a new paradigm. That's why we are here, and I'm very glad to see that more and more people are now taking action toward that change of paradigm. It's like I feel that there is a part of the population that is tired of being told what to do, who to be, and this is just one way and no other way. And I feel a surge of creativity that's coming up, and I really encourage that. And that's the whole point of now what I'm doing. And yeah, it's urgency, but in a good way. So thank you, thank you.
Yeah, and just to reflect something, Priscilla, when you're speaking, I think for the first time, I'm really able to distill how important it is to keep our eye on where we're moving. Having a positive vision for the future is so empowering and not to be underestimated. But at the same time, there is this deep desire that I have to really feel into the collapse and really be present to that and to hold that in its depths. And somehow I hadn't realized the way that those two can support each other and nurture each other, and the temptation to either only be optimistic and to just be trying to bypass or jump over the collapse that's underway, or to get stuck in that despair and not be connected with a positive vision. And holding them together feels, it's to me, it's in these quadrants. I don't know why today, but it's sort of like I'm holding the collapse sort of deeper at the bottom of my heart or something. But the vision is sort of something that is calling me into something more vigorous, something more enlivening. It's quite different energies in some way. Does anyone
Yeah.
feel like uh, bringing
I would just
anything here?
jump onto
Yeah.
just that last thing you said. It feels like the two go actually very well together because it's like it's the tension that creates the energy. It's this opposite, this the polarity. The more we feel that the collapse is like it's a huge thing, it's happening, it's down, it can be daunting. The more when we hold the vision, we get pulled toward it. That's yeah, that's how I feel. Thank you.
Hmm. I think I'm feeling a bit like overwhelmed in my body of um, how much information there is and how many different things there are to explore. And obviously thinking about like time limitations with this call. And then even like the nature of language is pretty linear. Um, so I don't know, there's some sort of anxiety about wanting to like cover like everything, but then um yeah, not being able to just by the nature of um our minds and I think in particularly how language shapes our thinking. But I do know that we can also get these like cool like gestalt like emergent groks in our mind, which is great. But I guess like that's still inside, like trying to communicate that still comes out in a somewhat linear way. Um, yeah. So I'm curious, yeah, just the alive threads in the group to bring back that question of like what feels most important to discuss.
I could share a little bit. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much, Sam, for the presentation. That was, yeah, a lot of information and really full picture, eagle eye view, a lot. And there were definitely certain parts that really stood out to me and resonated with me as like maybe more of my place in it all. And that's one of the things that I think about when I see these like really widespread pieces of data points. It's like sometimes it can feel overwhelming. Like, how do we grasp this, or how do we plug into this as an individual? And what's come through for me is to just see where we're each uniquely pulled and which categories, we are to be in service, and to trust that we don't have to do it all ourselves, and that there's somebody else and it's their place to kind of join in and plug in someplace where we're not. So some of the parts that stood out for me was the slide on ecological awareness and moving from competition to cooperation. And I think that's just a huge point for our evolution of consciousness, of moving away from this old survivalist way, fight or flight, like lower brainstem operating system, into the frontal cortex and onto like more of this honeybee kind of consciousness, kind of coming into realizing that it's a symbiotic dynamic, and shifting our lens, because I think that has been such a big way of interfacing with the world for so long. This very competitive, like me, mine, ours, and us versus them, and to realizing like we are all here on this one planet and we're all intimately connected and influencing each other. So how do we work together here instead of working against each other? And I think once we really tap into that, then we start to really speed up our process and our progress and entering into trust. And that kind of naturally moves into the next slide that I resonated with, was the return of transcendence. And I think as we move away from competition into cooperation and into that trust, we can open up into that more transcendent space. And it brings up something that's been coming through recently pretty strong, is the like telepathy tapes, and this more widespread conversation about these more mystical abilities. And nonverbal children seems to be kind of a starting ground for it, because it seems to be very common with nonverbal autistic children. But then also realizing that their caregivers, parents, and teachers are also finding ways to tap into telepathy to communicate with them. And this is like a big thing where there's a lot of pushback. And I think a lot of it is fear, because of the whole competitive operating system that is like, wait, no, like I need to protect myself and my thoughts and my mind. But when we look at like honeybees, for example, they realize, oh, we're all working together here. So the more that we can be connected, the easier it is for us to fulfill our goal and take care of the queen and produce the honey and pollinate the flowers. And also, the honeybee has been a great example for me of the evolution of consciousness, because they're one of the newest forms of the bees. Like first there were the
Mm,
wasps, and those were the competitive ones. And they were
mm,
also they would eat other insects, they were predatory in that way. And then the newest evolutionary version is the honeybee, where now they no longer need to eat other insects. They just, get the nectar from the flowers, and they all work together and it produces this honey. So I think it's a great symbol or metaphor or analogy for the overall direction that we're headed in. And I'll finish by saying that slide on crisis, on the catastrophe that brings the change and the awakening and breakdown, breakthrough, um, the phase shift. It's really interesting to see, like, sometimes I feel like we're further ahead than we are as humanity. And sometimes it seems like it's only through catastrophe that people really have the impetus to bring about changes, because we're so comfortable, at least a lot of people, that have a lot of power. And so it's hard, I think, to create the changes needed, for example, with our energy systems from to renewables, moving away from fossil fuels, the people with a lot of money kind of holding on to old systems as long as they can. So it makes me think like I know that this reorganizing phase shift is happening, but is it possible for it to happen to the extent needed without major catastrophe and crisis? So that's just a question I bring to the table as well. And I'll just conclude with that. Thank you.
Wow. Well, immediately, Daniel, that was so rich, and I really want to appreciate you for bringing, that very eloquent, you know, um, response in some ways. I feel like it was a very, yeah, I just really resonated with what you shared, and I would love to, spend a few more hours talking about it. I feel I wanted to say a couple of brief things because I can't resist. And one of them was like, I really see in partly from studying these like phase transition moments in physics that when a system reorganizes or when it specifically uh, becomes chaotic and disorganized, new possibilities are opened up that were not possible beforehand. And for me, that was it's so important to grok that because that's very true psychologically as well. I'd mentioned Jung here and many stories that Jung wrote about transformation, right? The psychology of transformation is essentially when oneself is put under so much pressure is the only time in some ways when the true depths of our inner wealth, our inner resources become available and become manifest. And yeah, I mean, for me, this is very, very explicitly when we can hold opposing forces, when we can hold these polarities, these tensions within our being, then and only then are the depths which are between that space, which is opened up between and beneath that. That's when those inner resources are opened up. Um, Again, that could be a whole conversation, but this is just by way of validating. And I wanted to just say one other thing, which was to try and connect this to the point that I was making about these multipolar traps, right? Or Molochian dynamics that are really underneath or undergirding a lot of the breakdown dynamics that we see in the world. Well, the essence of that way of thinking is really the idea that the illusion that rationally thinking in the short term advantages me at the expense of another. So it's this identification with the small self, really. And it's the thinking in terms of that small self in the short term at the expense of our collective interests. And then I want to say at the expense of our collective identity, our collective being. And that makes it very real in terms of the cultural redesign, cultural innovation work that I was mentioning is a huge part of what my own focus is creating spaces for that which we all share, which you could call the commons, to come into an awareness of its own. And to me, the parts about cooperation and what I would call relational ontology, something that is more about sacralizing the space between us, and at the same time, collective intelligence, collective decision making, the hive mind. These are concrete forms of existential awareness, a different sense of who we are, and different modes of social organization that have become possible partly as a result of technology that both stem from this foundational level shift in our awareness, in our collective awareness. And specifically, it's the remembering, the rerouting of ourselves in the sense that we are aspects of the same being, that the collective level of our identity can awaken through us in a deeply I don't just mean a group of humans, I mean a group of humans with the Earth Mother. For me, the honeybee has been in quite personal ways that I won't go into here, a deep symbol of the mother. And so it's just really synchronistic that you should happen to use that as your metaphor. Yeah, I hope that tied together some of the deepest concepts and the source of the problem and the direction toward a solution that I was hoping to offer today. I just sort of saw an opportunity for that and didn't want to let it escape me. So thank you again for the space. Um, Let me throw over to Ben or Benny just to check in with both of you.
Um, I mean, everyone here has had such great observations. I'm not sure if I have much to add, aside from just that the framework is really comprehensive. And I think Priscilla was talking about something about optimism and holding that paradox as well. And I think this framing, compared to some of the other framings that you and I have discussed, Sam, leaves me in my body feeling more agentic, I guess, and less despondent. I mean, obviously there is that recognition of the collapse and of the breakdown, but there is also that sense of being pushed towards action and having a positive vision. And I think that is so important to have some sense of positive direction for the future. So, yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much. And Benny, where are you at in your body?
Hmm. Um, I guess there's some anxiety, and I think my nervous system is a bit going in and out of dysregulation because of this kind of like open wound from a breakup. Um, but I'm really feeling like we're landing on the right area of here's this like ecology of problems, and there's an ecology of solutions, or sometimes like I don't like to use the word solutions, but like ways that we can meet the problem and be these agents of transition. So I really liked Daniel when you were saying that of just focus on what you intrinsically feel drawn towards and trust that there's enough other people who are drawn to the other stuff. Um, yeah, I think that helps because I often feel like part of the anxiety feels like it's a indecisiveness because I do feel drawn in many directions. Um, so it can be hard to, I guess, like dig in one spot enough to like strike the well water. Um, and yeah, I guess yeah, that's where I'm landing is like decisiveness is maybe a key ingredient in this era of like so many options and an overabundance of information and choices and stuff. Yeah, I'm thinking of like just how Netflix can provide so many movies, but then it's like a really common experience to just keep browsing and not being able to settle on one. Um, so yeah, I really feel like decisiveness is a key ingredient for everyone to play this role because I do feel like the emergence of us is us figuring out that and like locking into that, but also like coming together, not just playing like siloed roles, but how do our roles complement each other? Um, yeah. So I guess there's still large unknowns and yeah, yeah, ultimately like to summarize it, I'm feeling anxiety, but then I'm noticing I'm bringing in a conscious trust to kind of suit that.
Mm.
Mm. Can I share something
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that? Yeah, that actually anxiety is the exact same frequency as excitement,
Mm.
the
Yeah, yeah, I've
exact
heard
same
that.
frequency. So it's really about where you put your focus and that you redirect yourself. So when you say if you bring trust there, then you shift toward the the positive side, let's say, or the constructive side of this frequency, which is yeah, excitement. So yeah, it's nice to
Yeah,
know.
I've heard that like so many times, but for some reason it like landed in a new way when you said it. So yeah, thank you for that.
Oh, cool. Mm,
Mm.
yeah. And there's so many things. I took some notes as you were speaking, and I'm not sure I can articulate everything like in the call, but there's a lot of interesting material that comes from that. And
Mm.
I'm just gonna just say some words like key codes that I just pop up in my mind. Um, so bear with me, just a list of words. So the first one is sovereignty, also of the self, like holding ourselves and what we want to bring about in the world without being, like the leaf on the water. Integrity, and then collaboration, super super strong. Creativity, coherence, balance, wisdom, support relational space. Like I love the words sacralizing the relational space. That was beautiful.
Mm.
And instead of being in the responsiveness, being more in like in the agency, so being sovereign, again goes to the sovereignty. And then I was reflecting on the Netflix things because that's so much of our experience today of like browsing through things and having constant solicitation of anything, people, emails, phone, everything. And that puts us in that reactive survival, like moment to moment thing. And when we're unplugged from this, when we do meditation or when we go walk in nature, then we pause. We pause the chatter. And this is the space when we have even boredom that we can actually listen. This is the only time we actually listen to what's inside rather than reacting. And this to me, this is where the inspired action, inspired like coming from spirit, is driving your action. So that's super important to me, and I love that your work is about creating spaces for people to get together and share and collaborate, because that's also the other thing that I found that helps us getting away from the idea of separation that we have from the world and anything and everyone. And as we get together in a space and we start to listen to how we feel in that space and start to resonate with other people, and like we kind of tune in what's there, what's alive, and we will allow that to birth creation. It's not like we have to think about the perfect framework or the perfect thing to what are we going to do. It's just like it arises from just who we are, and that to me is actually the most alive experience that we can have, and this is also the most aligned experience that we can have as a collective, to create something that is just brilliant. You know, this is how the paradigm is shifting. Rather than trying to fix something outside of us, instead bringing what wants to be created, what new thing is there in the field, because everything exists. We just get to open and receive actually those ideas and action. Um, yeah. So resonance would be also a word for me.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think one of our goals in coming together is that when we can create this collective intelligence, like we're actually able to boost our antenna so that the field we become more receptive to the field. And ideally it's like the field speaks through us and we're just clearer. We feel like more of ourselves, and our gifts can be stronger and yeah, just come through more palpably and effortlessly. Um, One thing you said reminded me of like one of my favorite quotes from the Tao Te Ching, which is the master doesn't think about his actions, they just flow from the core of his being. And it's that idea of wu wei. And I'm thinking about like when I was surfing today, it was only my second time in like years. And the first wave I tried to catch, I just like something just like snapped into me and I just like started paddling, and all of a sudden I was just like standing up right in this wave and I was like, I have no clue how that just happened. Um, yeah, I think there's like a process of learning things. Like I'm asking my friend questions, and there's like this intellectual understanding that is maybe necessary to get the techniques down, but then ultimately like the part of doing, and when it becomes like a part of your being, those are like the more um yeah, just not thinking. And I think yeah, the most important action comes from that being mode. um
Mm. I
yeah.
had
Embodiment.
just a couple of
Mm.
small things. One of them, again, I wanted to quote the Tao. I was also thinking that the Tao, it pulls in places that are the lowest, in places loathed by all men, in the sense of finding
Mm.
the Tao again in a place that's very lowly, in a place that we might not expect to find it. What about right here in this space between us that we've been ignoring for maybe millennia in some ways. The other thing I had was that there's a palpable sense that I have now that the way that we're engaging in dialogue together is really uh, speaking to, but also speaking from the spirit that I'm trying to invoke. Especially Priscilla, when you like consolidated all of those words, right? It gives us a, a a different kind of resolution on the space that we're exploring together. If you know what I mean, it's like, and it's a way that those different words they bring out those flavors. Like each of those words resonates in us in a way that is much deeper in some ways than just exchanging packets of information. It's more about that which is conveyed through us and between us rather than about the information that is conveyed. And I gotta like the body doesn't lie, and I'm getting a sense of that here in the field, and that's for me very actually really validating and encouraging and exciting because it's like, no, it really is possible to create spaces like this where just by talking, this kind of energy can emerge. Hard to know what language to use to talk about it, but I think everyone has their own sense of what I mean. Benny, I wanted to invite you, if you feel called to, as we're approaching sort of the final 10 to 15 minutes of the call, at least in terms of the recording, would you like to take the chance to drop us down a little bit more into a space of, well, of your choosing, really. Whatever you feel called to, where would you like to guide us? That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I was thinking of like I first was thinking of like, yeah, kind of rising up again and seeing like from the bird's eye view. But now, like last minute, I'm almost thinking of this kind of like sinking down. Like different people, like Bill Plotkin, talk about like the descent into soul, and yeah, just the soil and the mysterious darkness. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it'd be cool to just do a somewhat quick guided meditation just into deeper feeling and invoking and seeing if we can consolidate this call a bit. So I'm just thinking I might want to try to play just some quiet, like meditative music, but I'm not sure. Just give me like 30 seconds here because my Spotify is bugging out a little bit.
As you were searching, I wanted to add something about the antenna you were mentioning,
Hmm.
like we're antennas to receive information. And what I believe also is that as we are sharing this space together, we are emitting a frequency again and information out of even the words. It's just like who we are and what we resonate. And that also goes through the same antenna and is spread out to the field. And it's
Hmm.
like it creates kind of a new node in the quantum field that other ones who are seeking for that type of information and resonance will kind of access, and it kinds of the ripple effect. It's beyond just us, and that's what I love in this type of environment. Mm.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that in. I think that's a really important point that it's like bi-directional. It's like we receive from the field just as much as like we're sending to it. And when what we send to the field changes how other people receive the field. And there's cool like peace gathering projects with like transcendental meditation communities where um like you see crime rates drop and there's like less car crashes and just really mysterious ways of like how we're influenced by a group of people coming together to like uh you know focus on things like peace and love and these just higher frequency states of being. All
As
right, I just
you're
want to see. Yeah.
organizing yourself, I just had something to mention as well that Priscilla was talking about listening, and returning to listening as a kind of what I would call existential stance, a way of taking a sort of judo stance in relation to the whole situation, listening, deep listening. And many people, through the circling tradition that really downloaders come to me, but particularly Viveki talks about renewing the senses, a book by Mark Wynne, and returning to sort of renewing our senses in a spiritual sense. And there's something about this, the idea that we've been deaf, the idea that we haven't fully been able to hear uh, what is wanting to speak through each moment of life. And so to me, again, returning to listening toward the end feels extremely appropriate. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So listen, we shall. Did you get my request for sharing?
Yes, I believe it was granted.
Okay. Let's see here. Oh, it says it's not turned on. Well, yeah, if you can't figure it out within the next few seconds, we can just start without music.
Do you happen to know where that is?
No. Yeah, so let's just we can figure it out another
You can
time.
share all participants. That might have changed something.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that did. Okay.
Forgive me for not being tech native, but not exactly my forte again. I prefer the ecological awareness side of things.
Okay. Do you guys hear that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So, yeah, just find a meditative posture, just with a tall, erect spine, feeling this softness. Let your eyes shut and just immediately feel the force of gravity pulling you down. Start to slow your breath. Feel this tension of sitting tall and feeling light, but then also being pulled down to the ground. And just noting that we exist within these minds that like to wander, and that's just a part of the process. So just having a strong intention that there's nothing worth thinking about or figuring out outside of this meditation, fully allowing ourselves to drop in. Deepening your breath, continuing to relax. Just allowing your experience to be as it is without needing to name it or label it. What does it feel like to be in a body before it turns into some description words? Now just gently, in a very cozy way, just allow your awareness to start to melt down to the earth. Starting to move through layers of sediment and soil, compact matter, matter that's all touching. Sinking down. So we make this journey into the core, the nucleus of the mother. And feeling in this darkness of the ground, the deep fertility from which everything can be built on top of. And cultivating a trust in this darkness, in the unknown. As the realm where we find ourselves again. So feeling this tether as a cell in this body of the earth to the core, and the nucleus that contains the DNA for a phase shift. Now I want to ask you to invoke a very deep and real part of yourself that may be forgotten, but has existed before this incarnation and will exist after. And I want to take you to the moment before you were born, of on some level knowing what you're coming into this experience for. A very brave and noble purpose and mission. Feel this sense of the inner initiate. That you came in with the ingredients for this time. Just leaning back into the enormity of the soul. And now from this core, this nucleus, this well, starting to rise back up, renewed, refreshed by the waters of remembrance, moving up through the layers, feeling and trusting in the darkness. Now emerging through the soil and witnessing life again. All the greens and blues and reds and yellows and purples. And seeing how the fundamental soil can give rise to such a complex web of life. Coming back up into your body, through your feet, through your perineum, and then just arriving in your heart space. Some wisdom traditions regard the heart space as the seat of the soul. So just trusting that our minds are powerful tools, but ultimately where we go to rejuvenate is our heart, our hearts that are connected to the cosmic heart and to the global heart. And when they can beat in synchrony, then we live from this knowingness that guides us to do what is ours to do. Just relaxing and simmering, fully letting go of any control of your thoughts. Just see if you can let everything be exactly the way it is without interfering. Letting something greater than you breathe your body. And you can start to more consciously become aware of your body in the room and in the Zoom room, and our togetherness. That even though our eyes were closed, we in some way took this journey together. You can start to squeeze different parts of your body, or just, yeah, really it's coming back to feeling. I invite you to open your eyes when you're ready, but just look around the space you're in. Remember that there's so many things to notice that we often edit out, and that often the next step in front of us is right in front of our eyes, just waiting for us to notice. Yeah, so just taking it all in, and you're ready, come back to the Zoom room, and yeah, noticing it looks darker where Sam is from when we went into that meditation. Um, yeah, so we are a bit over the hour. I hope that's okay, but yeah, if there's anything that feels alive, no pressure, but yeah, just love for the space to hear anything that came through and the insights. Yeah.
And I wanted to add just one piece. If you feel called to share how you feel called to act, or in what direction you feel your own path will take in fitting into, the that which is new and emergent, which we've discussed. If you'd like to presence that, that feels important.
Yeah, and I think we can do like a whole call just on that. Um, so I'm really interested in getting to know people based on what they feel their callings are. Yeah, so just double double clicking on that invitation.
Um, for me, there's pressure to try to focus on all of the, I guess, breakdown risks or emergence types of emergence. But for now, I think I'm I'm quite content to do my part on AI safety when I can, and also just to um, continue with my ecology practices in in the current way that I am doing. because I think for myself, I part of my journey is kind of just trying to be more genuine to my own desires and personality and not trying to take on the world. But everyone's journey is so different. So I think it's nice to see that I can have a place in this framing and contribute in my own unique way.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Well, I think what's coming through for me is excitement to just be in these kinds of spaces more of collaborative conversations and deep explorations. And just talking to a friend the other day who was sharing with me that there seems to be a lack of spaces like this. And a lot of people, at least in my community here in Ashland, Oregon, prefer to just, go do ecstatic dance and go have fun. I enjoy going swimming and having fun and doing all that stuff too, but also I think there's a part of my spirit and soul and other friends of mine that wants to have these kinds of conversations and talk about deeper things. So, yeah, I just want to keep having calls like this. And also, I'm curious if this is a space that's open to maybe inviting a friend or two to join for coming weeks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um,
Okay.
and I'm also interested to hear feedback from you guys, particularly. Yeah, if there's any particular like areas that you want to make better sense of, whether it's like more macro level or like a specific topic. Um, yeah, I can't promise it will be kind of aligned with what Sam and I have envisioned for this, but I do really want to, yeah, hear feedback and hear what people are interested to explore more.
Mm.
So yeah,
So
no pressure to talk, but if you could
yeah, I
also
can
message
share.
us after. Yeah, but go ahead, Priscilla.
Yeah, first, thank you for the meditation. I enjoyed the sense of peace that it brought, actually. Connectedness and peace. Beautiful. So for my part, what I'm most excited about is creating those spaces in the physical, like bringing people together in the physical. I've just done a retreat in Portugal, and this is where I met Benjamin, actually, Sam. He came to the space where the idea was to have, it was over like a long weekend, but my idea is to extend a bit more, have a space where we together experience life as if we do take care of the body, some movement first, really taking care of the vessel is important. And as we do that, then we open ourselves to, again, the channel opens, and that allows us then to kind of in resonance feel what's alive in the field. And from that, then start to, kind of having ideas sparking on what we want to explore during the day that day. And it could be honestly whatever. Sometimes it's, like thing that needs to come up and needs to be cleared. And the intelligence of the group is beautiful, how people articulate and support each other in those moments. And then after having kind of a, yeah, let's say practices to ground this, integrate this together, and then have like space to co-create, because we have also times where we say, oh, okay, maybe I want to propose a practice tomorrow morning, or maybe I would like to share about something. And then out of this is so beautiful what happens after the retreat. Each participant gained something from each other. They co-created something together. They created value together, and it continues on. It was just not like one thing in a weekend. It builds up, and I'm super passionate about that. So my thing is to hold those type of places, spaces for people, and I bring what I know most. It's holding the frequency and working with the body, the mind, the spirit. I work a lot in the quantum realms. I'm a healer. So yeah, that's what I'm most passionate about, because the idea about that is not only to bring people together and create things, but is to have each individual remember really who they are, like as of not separated from each other, but also what is it that makes them most alive when we're in a group space. We are kind of reveal ourselves, like other people reflect to us what's our gift. Very often we don't even see what our gifts are because they're just natural to us. And so having the reflection is super important, and it helps to strengthen our path and our purpose, brings clarity. So yeah, that's what is moving me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to thank you for like all the time you haven't been talking. I'm just very taking note of like how lit up you seem. I just sense like a lot of life force from your facial expressions and the kind of like, yeah, whatever's shining through your eyes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also wanted to say that I feel there's a lot of wisdom there. I mean, certainly from all of us to a degree, but I just noticed that in terms of the balance of masculine and feminine energy, it feels like, uh, you know, four parts of wisdom coming from you for each one from each of us in some ways. So yeah, and mm, there's a few things. I mean, really just wanted to thank each of you for coming. And like as Benny was saying, this is something, it's a space that we're experimenting with. And um, I feel like for me, this space today was very much proof of concept that there really are people who are interested, to make sense together, first of all, that we can find them, second of all, that hopefully what we share can be impactful and meaningful in exactly the right way that we intend, which is really toward, yes, grokking all of this together, but doing it in an embodied and heart-centered way, in a way that increases our agency in the world. Um, and so thank you for coming. And as he said, very open to feedback of all different kinds. I would say, for what it's worth, that most of the spaces that we're intending to hold are not necessarily so information dense. I think I really do value, and I deeply understand the importance of holding these spaces for co-creation and to see what wants to emerge more naturally. And um, I felt like today there was a great balance struck.
Mm. Yeah. And I just want to thank you, Sam, for the breakdown. I just feel like that was a really brilliant distillation of the way you were able to communicate all of that. Yeah.
You notice how that maps over to the breakdown and breakthrough. I'm just noticing that, and I feel like sharing. There's a way that the call today was sort of structured in two different halves. The first half with this big information download, and the second half with this sort of more organic, bottom up, something more emergent or co-creative. And that maps to the structure of the download. That there's something about my sort of download, as we were saying, that is sort of old world in its model. There's something about one guy sort of delivering all this information, which is sort of in essence obsolete in some way. So I just hadn't noticed that resonance, which is quite cool. And I felt like reflecting to Priscilla, there's something about people of different sensibilities uh, having sort of synergetic value in the same space here, where we can all come with five different perspectives. I'm not sure, Ben, I think could you hit mute, please?
Oh yeah, I might have to head off, but
Okay.
yeah, thank you for the session.
Yeah,
I
very
really
welcome.
appreciate it. And I will see you soon. Nice to meet you, Daniel and Priscilla. Right, bye.
Thanks so much for coming, Ben.
Well, all I wanted to say is that the differences between us can be the basis of synergy rather than the basis of, rivalry and conflict. And there's something about sort of explicitly presencing the value of many different sensibilities, many different kinds of people is something that I find uh, nutritious.
Yeah, I love that. Nutritious. Good word. Good word. Yeah.
And so I'm left with feeling like this went really well, and it was lovely to meet both of you. And we're going to return every week at pretty much the same time. And just before I close off the recording, I wanted to invite Benny if you wanted to leave us with anything from you.
Mm. Um, think just piggybacking that a little bit, I guess, that, we're experimenting with this container and really allowing space for it to take on a life of its own. So I'm really grateful to you guys for showing up to be a part of like the early developmental stages of um yeah, this weekly thing that we want to do.
Well, thank you for having us. Yeah, truly appreciate it. It was a beautiful moment. I loved yeah, also the reflection of Sam was like the first part was kind of the old world as of like very linear, very mind driven, and then after we opened to something more organic, it's yeah, great, beautiful. Thank you.
Spiritual midwifery is what I would call this. As I